It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. Joining me on the show again today for the second time, Steven Rosen, who is the founder of Star Results. He's an author, speaker, trainer, and expert on training sales managers. You can find him online at starresults.com. Steven, welcome to Accelerate.
Andy, thanks so much for having me back.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. You're one of my first guests, actually. So this is sort of like a reunion of sorts.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is Accelerate has done incredibly well. As I was surfing the net and looked at all the sales podcasts out there, you've come in as top 10 in a couple articles and top line articles that top 10 best sales podcasts to listen to.
Well, excellent.
So it's a pleasure to be here.
Well, great. Well, that's a mutual pleasure. So for the people maybe who missed you the first time around, why don't you give a little bit of introduction to yourself?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go back to my days in sales. I've sort of been on the street, carrying a bag in sales, and I've worked my way up through the sales organization, doing the frontline sales manager job, national sales manager, VP of sales and marketing for two Fortune 500 companies in Canada in the pharmaceutical biotech industry, and I also was responsible for medical devices. And over the last, I guess it's 13 years now, I've run my own business called Star Results, and what we do is we help sales leaders crush their sales numbers. And really it's about driving performance through people and through great leadership, and leadership development is really our focus, and that's all we do. Okay, so let's start by saying, what's the difference between management and leadership? Management is about telling people what to do. It's not a collaborative process. Leadership is providing a vision and really getting people to go to that vision because they want to go there. So, leadership offers a much broader view, and it's really about engaging people and helping them move in a direction that aligns their goals and the company's goals. So should we get rid of this term sales manager? Well, part of what I work on is, there is a management component to the job, but as we realize in many jobs, they keep expanding, and, your podcast is called Accelerate, and we look at what skills are going to accelerate sales, because that's what sales organizations are tasked with. And, management is not necessarily contribute a positive aspect to accelerating sales, but sometimes there's components that are, necessary evils. When it comes to accelerating sales, leadership, coaching are key skill sets that managers can use to really drive sales and accelerate performance, engage people, and really create what we call a high-performance sales organization. So it is a combination of both. I'm not sure if we can get rid of the term, but really... Well, replace it. So you said we have an individual's responsibility for managing, leading, and coaching. Well, and we brand them with the one that's the least likely to change the performance. I'm with you. In fact, one of the things I talk about is actually transforming sales managers, because it's easy to manage. It's very hard to lead. And when you're on the front line, it's even more challenging because you're tasked with execution. You're tasked with a whole bunch of tasks, and a lot of sales managers find they get bogged down by tasks as opposed to leading. So, as a title and as their role, really we push much harder to evolve those people from just managing to leading. And the more leading they do, the better their performance. So I'm with you. I think that's a great direction. And when I speak to sales leaders, and if you hear me, I talk about leadership development. And one of the biggest challenges most organizations face across all levels of the organization is leadership development, developing leaders for the future and for today. Okay. So without preempting what we're going to talk about coming up, really the topic today is you
publish, and you've done this for some number of years now, is you publish an annual report, you do some research, surveys of people within the field about sort of the state of sales management.
I do, and this is actually the second annual. I did one back in 2011, and then we kind of stopped for a while. But as we look, there's a real need to gauge. I think we gauge different things. We look at, of course, we survey sales leaders around the world, and we look at five key components, or mainly five key components, which are coaching, leadership, performance management, hiring, and business planning as core skills. And we've also looked at them as core processes for sales managers. And we go out and we ask folks to evaluate the importance of them and how well their organization is doing supporting skill development in those areas, because they are core areas. We've talked about two of them, were leadership and coaching. Hiring obviously is a key skill. It may not be used as often as the others, and performance management as well. So we've gone out, we finalized. It took us a bit of time to take in the information, but there's some really, I call it shocking, although I'm not shocked because we saw some of this last year. And, Andy, I think we're both aligned that one of the foundations for a successful sales organization, or one of the key foundations or building blocks, is the frontline sales manager.
Right. So let's go back to your report a little bit in the research. So you surveyed people around the world. Yeah. Was it primarily large enterprise? Was it a mix of company sizes?
It varied actually by region, by size. We're looking at some of the nitty-gritties in terms of cross-tabulation, but I mentioned that the results were what I find shocking, or that I'm not shocked about them. Either way you want to look at it. But what we found was, in the core skill sets that we mentioned, that only 50% of sales organizations are supporting ongoing training and development of their sales managers, whether it be coaching, leadership, performance management, hiring, or business planning.
All right, well, let's break that down. So when you say only 50% of organizations are supporting that, meaning that there are 50%, half the companies out there that have sales managers do nothing to train them, help them transition from a non-management role to a management role, or if they're hired in from the inside, don't provide any onboarding, formal onboarding processes, performance monitoring, and so on?
That's exactly what we found. And we actually broke down new sales managers as a separate entity just to get a gauge. But when you're looking at sales management development, you can either look at it as a glass half full or glass half empty, because there's 50% of those sales managers are getting nothing. They're really not getting any development or ongoing support in those core areas. And then we wonder why companies are struggling to make their sales numbers. A lot of money is invested. Billions of dollars are invested in sales training, yet the sales manager, who's the foundation of performance in the sales organization, 50% of them are really not getting any development opportunities. And, of course they're struggling.
So how do we change that conversation? Because, this is, as you said, shocking. Not completely new. I know Jason Jordan, in his book, Cracking the Sales Management Code, had research showing that, investment in sales managers has a higher return than investment in salespeople. So what has to be done to get the culture to change sort of at the C-level to say, okay, this is one of our most precious resources, this meaning sales leaders, frontline sales leaders, and we need to, think out, I don't know if it's outside the box, but we need to think more broadly about how we invest in this whole sales function.
Well, some of it comes from discussing the subject. Certainly, I've chatted with Jason when the study came out, and yourself and many others, and we see a lot more of the sales experts are focusing more at at the management level or the leadership level. The challenge, I think. There's several challenges, but one, sometimes these 50% of companies that have invested in supporting their sales managers are not necessarily getting the return that they expect, and there's some inherent issues with training in that if you're doing the 1 to 2 day training course and you're not following up, then even the 50% who are getting that are not necessarily getting any better. The approach we take is much more in depth, and we not only train managers, but we mentor them, we coach them, and we help them master the skills. So, to give someone a 2-day coaching course and as a senior leader to pat yourself on the back and say, hey, we've done coaching this year. No, you haven't done coaching this year, because we all know in a short period of time without reinforcement that whatever money spent on training goes by the wayside. So I prefer to look at it at, are we developing sales leaders? And development is an ongoing commitment. And much fewer organizations see it as such. So I think it's broadening, one, the understanding that these are your key people in your organization who are going to make a difference. Two, looking at better ways to really what I call creating skill mastery. So they not just learn a skill, they're able to do it. They're able to actually do what they've learned and make it as you've talked about, a habit, an ongoing behavior. And that takes time. That could take up to 6 months. And we work with sales leaders, one-on-one to help them implement those skills and work through the nuances of whether it be coaching or performance management or any of the other key skills, leadership, that they're working on. So there's several aspects. One certainly is, improving how we look at training, not doing training, but looking at a development spectrum. And really the other component is, recognizing that, we want to invest in these people because, as you said, your biggest bang for your buck, assuming there's a 10-to-1 ratio of sales managers to sales reps, you're going to get a much bigger bang for your buck investing in your sales leaders. The other thing, and maybe I'm taking it off topic, but a lot of investment, or at least a lot of noise that we see in the industry, is very much evolved around technology and adding technology on, and CRM, and there's so many great apps out there. But that in itself, I don't believe is the silver bullet. And I think without the foundation of great sales leadership, any of those initiatives are going to be suboptimal.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, if you have a suboptimal process, or if you've got somebody who is not performing up to their potential, then layering technology on top is not going to fix that problem.
And I think that's what a lot of organizations, I was a VP of sales for 10 years, and every year I'm looking at, what can I do differently to drive greater performance, right? We're always trying to push the bar higher. And I think we forget about our sales managers or sales leaders. I've got to get in that habit, but we forget about them, and we expect that they know what they're doing until they don't know what they're doing, and then we probably fire them. So the investment in technology without a foundation in place, to me, is putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah, well, I think there's certainly an assumption that the technology drives the generation of a lot of data, and the collection and analysis of the data is perceived by some to be a substitute for coaching and performance management and the level of behavior setting and behavior establishment that really is required to move a team forward.
100%. So part of it, I think, coming back to your question, what Accelerate is about. It's about accelerating sales, and I think it's a combination of technology. That's not the first one, but I mentioned it first. People and processes. And if you look on the people component, a lot of money's invested in your sales representative, which I think is great. I think there's a miss, and I think we need to get that message out that there are better ways to develop your sales managers. And you should be focused on that. And the other component we looked at in the study this year was on looking at those same 5 activities or skills or behaviors, and looking at how well understood and how effective those processes are within those organizations.
So, for instance?
Okay. So, we looked at, we asked our participants, do you have a highly effective, well understood coaching methodology within your organization? And, in terms of people agreeing or being agreeable, which is agreeing or highly agreeing, only 44% said yes. So, of course, the flip side is that 56% are saying, hey, it's not highly effective or it's not well understood. So, one of the challenges or one of the upsides, companies who have a methodology that they follow, almost in anything, if you follow a sales methodology, you're going to increase sales because sales is a process. Same as coaching. Managers, complain that coaching is really difficult to do. Well, unless you sort of have a process or a methodology, it's even harder to do, and then everyone's doing it differently. So there's a real gap there, and across the board, whether it be formal business planning process, which we had 55%, systematic hiring process, and if you think of the cost of making bad hires, again, only 44% of respondents said they agreed or were in agreement with the fact that their company had a systematic hiring process. It gets a little bit better. We looked at leadership as a process of aligning goals, which we got a 60% positive response. And seemingly the most important skill that came out and the companies focused most on is performance management.
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about how there seems to be still more emphasis in the report. You talk about this, more emphasis placed on managing performance versus giving managers or sales leaders the tools to help develop consistent performance among their team. And I think that, again, for entrepreneurs, C-level people that are listening to the show, I mean, this is sort of, I think, where the rubber really meets the road, is that I think there's a tendency, as you go higher up in the organizations, I just want to know, are we making it or not? And
yes, it becomes very black and white.
Right. And, I don't want to know how the sausage is being made necessarily, but as you move down closer to where the action happens in terms of the levels of management, somebody needs to care. And what you're saying is it seems to be that too often the only person that really cares is just one level above the salesperson.
Well, I'm not even sure that they realize that they're not getting what they need. To me, as a VP of sales, every year I started with a very simple process. What are the 3 critical factors for success? And for me, there was always a component which included the frontline sales manager, whether it be spending more coaching time, whether it be developing their skill sets, and that was an ongoing process. So, you're right. The CEO probably doesn't have exposure to how well the frontline managers are doing or how well the reps are doing. But certainly at the VP of sales level, they pull those levers as to, we obviously salaries are locked in and, travel and entertainment is locked in. Within their funds, they certainly have some money where they're investing in technology, process improvement, or development. And the reality is most will agree if you speak to them and say, hey, who are your most important people to drive sales? They'll say, Steven, it's the frontline sales manager. And say, okay, well, what are you doing to help them get better? And then you get this blank look saying, I really don't know what I can do for them. And that's where the challenge lies. I really do look to VPs of sales and say, okay, we're giving you the holy grail here. And the foundation for success is your frontline sales manager. Yes, you want to have great technology. Yes, you want to make sure your processes are well understood. But where do you start? And to me, most companies will start with, most sales organizations will start with product knowledge training, sales skills training, making sure they have a CRM in place. And the last thing that kind of surfaces is, what are we going to do with our frontline sales managers? Because they're expected to know what to do.
Well, this is if you were to look at the topics of books that have been published in 2015, 2016 about sales, there has been some very noticeables, to my mind, to increase the number of titles about sales management. Exactly. And clearly something is afoot if sales experts and authors and so on are saying, gosh, we're out here in the field, we're doing our research, and we're seeing this as sort of a real choke point for companies these days.
Well, Mike Weinberg's book, New Sales Management or Sales Management Simplified, is a great example because Mike shares some amazing stories of what he's seen being out in the field. And, he's usually brought in and myself as well, can you fix our sales force? We have a problem. We're not selling well. Can you fix it? And in most cases, when you peel back the onion, you get out there and you ask the questions and you begin to understand the organization, that's usually not the main problem. It's usually a leadership issue. And until organizations really focus on leadership, they could be spending millions of dollars on their sales force, but yet getting suboptimal returns.
So what do you do if you're a sales leader, you're a frontline sales leader, and you're just not getting what you think you need to get in terms of the support, either in a development standpoint, process standpoint, investment and training, across the board? Because I know that a lot of frontline managers listen to this program. What steps do you take individually?
Well, I'm going to do share one thing that we're doing, but, the easy answer to that is, in this day and age, if I want to learn about Facebook or LinkedIn, there are so many resources, free resources online that that if you take the time to tap into, and I'm sure, Andy, yourself, you weren't an expert on hosting podcasts 2 years ago, but now you are. So the ability to learn and ingest and find information to help you get better at whatever you're doing exists out there. And you've got to search and find it. For myself, one of the most important things I look at is how can we develop great sales leaders. So what we are doing is, we're providing ongoing webinars. We're just starting with our second one, which I'm going to put a plug in here if you're okay with it.
Sure.
We're doing the ultimate sales leadership strategy for high performance. And that's coming up. We're going to have one every month. So depending on when this airs, I don't want to leave a date, but if you want to find out more, you can go to www.starresults.com/webinar and see when our next one is. And for managers who want to learn more, we have a very sort of revolutionary approach to developing sales managers, which is a combination of training, one-on-one coaching, assessment, and tools to really create skill mastery. And it's done over a 6-month period. So we're really looking to help those 50% of managers who are not getting the support, and those people who want to take control of their own career. Because, I worked through a sales management role. I had no training. Some of us are lucky and we find some tricks to be successful. But in most cases, if you want to compete in this world, there are resources out there. We have created one specifically for that segment of managers, even though a lot of our work is corporate, to help them, because there really isn't a ton of things out there for them. If they go to a large training organization, they're going to send them on a public training course. And personally, I don't find, they're great to go to, but I don't find them impactful in terms of changing behaviors. And that's really what we're focused on, is creating the behavior of skill mastery, of coaching, is arguably the most important skill. We'll train managers on how to be effective coaches. We'll share a methodology with them and really try to build them up so they can not just understand it, but they can do it, and do it with ease. And that takes time.
So which part of that is the revolutionary part?
The revolutionary part is, number one, go to any sales organization, and when you're talking about training, there's no companies that do one-on-one coaching as a follow-up. So what we do is we have our training is on demand, so the manager can see it as they need it over a 6-month period. What we do is 2 things that are revolutionary. 1, we gauge the manager's coaching effectiveness prior. And 2, not only do we provide the content in easy to understand chunks, every month we'll connect with the manager to help them work through the nuances of skill mastery. And by the end of that 6 months, they're out there and they're actually impacting sales, as opposed to a 1 or 2 day course, which feels great, but it's 1 or 2 days you'll never get back in your life. So they never actually even have to leave the field to do what we're doing. And I don't think there's anyone, and I've searched and I've asked various folks who are in the training industry who else offers this, and I think we're the only ones who are offering this approach to skill mastery. Okay,
so you offer at the tail end of your report 5 strategies for developing a strong sales management team, and you just described the 5th strategy, which was outsource the development of your developing your sales management team. So let's talk about some of the other strategies. So the first one is provide intensive support and feedback for your new sales managers.
Okay. So one of the things, just to throw in some stats, I'm not a stats guy, but...
well, you just did a study. You've got stats.
Well, I'm not a stats guy, but stats are good to at least form some perspective. And the beauty of doing the same research over time, it's a very sad state for new sales managers because only a third of them have any formal training before they're thrown in to sink or swim.
So only a third of companies provide formal training for sales managers.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And, there's various stats. There's one I quote that says 40% of new sales leaders fail in the first 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not surprising.
Okay. And there's studies that say even higher. But, the impact is detrimental on your sales organization. So, in terms of providing support and feedback for new sales managers, that really lies with the next level of management to take a greater ownership to the development of their new sales manager, not thinking that, hey, because they were a great rep, we're going to put them in and make them a great coach. And I think one of the greatest examples, and, as a Canadian, you didn't mention I'm Canadian, but, the greatest hockey player in the world, Wayne Gretzky, was not the greatest coach in the world. Right. And in fact, he failed miserably as a coach. And I think he's an amazing individual, but not everyone who plays can coach. And it's a different skill set. And, so of course, I don't need to go into the long argument, but if you promote your best sales rep into a sales leadership role and they fail, which if you're not doing anything for them, chances are, unless they're super individuals, will fail, or they'll have a complete negative impact on their team in terms of engagement, performance, morale, and turnover. And we've seen it where, and there's no going back for them because once they've been promoted to manager, they're not going back to be your best rep. So you've lost in two cases. So intensive support, you can look at two ways. One, ownership being taken by their next level of management, whether that's the regional VP, the VP, but you need to be there for them and having ongoing sessions. And of course, if that fails, you go to number 5, which says outsource. And I really think, small to medium-sized companies maybe don't have the resources to support a new sales manager. And what I suggest is that, I don't know how often it happens, maybe it's 1 or 2 times a year, that they have an organization that they know can take that manager and help them transition the first 90 to 180 days. And I think the cost of doing that versus the cost of a failure is almost a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, I would agree that the cost of having a failure sales management level is substantial. I mean, it's cost of a bad sales hire. One study I saw said was 7 times the person's first year salary.
Right.
You have to imagine there's a multiplier effect there if a sales manager fails. So let's go back to, you'd said that only 32% of companies have some formal onboarding for sales managers. What would be really interesting to find out is whether the same applies for onboarding of salespeople. Because if only 32% of companies have a formal process for onboarding salespeople and bringing them up to a point of sales readiness to go out and be productive, you're multiplying the problem.
100%. And, I don't have an answer to the question, but I do have some anecdotal experience. And, coming from the pharmaceutical diagnostic equipment business, we had great training for new sales reps. And it was offered several times a year where we take a rep through 3 weeks of intensive product training, how to work within the organization, selling skills. That was a program of pride. And I can tell you, in most organizations, there's a lot of effort spent. And I can't quote the number because I don't have it, but most people listening would probably shake their heads and say, we do a great, maybe not a great job onboarding. Sometimes there's onboarding issues, but in terms of training new sales reps to get them up to speed, to make their first sale, companies do a pretty damn good job in that area. I know I did when I was a VP of sales, and organizations I've worked with spend a lot of time, and their trainers are focused on that. Once you move outside the realm of the sales rep, I think the stat was close to 50% of organizations had dedicated dedicated trainers for their sales leadership team.
Well, I think one of the real issues, and this is a conundrum I've seen time and time again, is and it's sort of crazy when you think about it, is managers oftentimes refuse to ask for help, or by the same token, companies refuse to consider giving their managers help because the perception is they should know what they're doing. We just promoted them to be manager. Don't they know everything, right?
That's the expectation.
And I can't tell you the number of times I've worked with VPs of sales and others that took a long time to work with them and the CEOs and perhaps sometimes the board to get approval for them to be able to hire a resource to help them improve what they're doing.
And that speaks to the challenge we talked about earlier, that even companies that identify that as an upside, as something that will help accelerate their sales, improve performance, because that's what we're all looking for, is ways to improve. And I come back and I've been, talking about this. I've been, for a number of years, and that's probably at least 10 of my 13 years in my business. About, these are the long lost soldiers. And, I'm not a military guy, but I think, the military does a very good job training. And when you send a commander out with a unit, you better hope that commander is well trained for, on the spot combat and being able to make decisions. Mm-hmm. And I don't think the military sends them out unqualified. At least I hope not.
I think they do a pretty good job.
So I look at the frontline manager as that same type of individual who, we're all trying to squeeze out more performance. It's competitive marketplaces. People talk about, people being their main advantage. Well, the people who help the people who drive revenue are your frontline sales leaders. So, I think, in terms of investment, you're looking at a 10-to-1 ratio or a 1-to-10 ratio in terms of sales leaders, that if you're going to invest $1, or if you had $1 to invest, that's probably the best place to invest it in terms of getting return. Okay.
So now we move to the last segment of the show where I've got some questions I ask all my guests, and you've been on the show before, so you've actually answered some of those. So I came up with new questions for you.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
This is a curveball. I want to be like Donald Trump and have all my questions prearranged.
I'm sorry. So
I'm just joking. I love the spontaneity of the show.
So here's a new hypothetical scenario. You're the sales leader selling a B2B product to enterprise, and your CEO, this is the start of a new fiscal year, your CEO gives you your goals for the new fiscal year, and it's a pretty large increase in revenues that you're responsible for, let's say 12% increase. But he's not giving you any additional headcount or other resources in order to achieve it. So what do you do?
Okay, that's a great question. And I think I have a pretty good answer on that because I spent a lot of time thinking about it. So it's another program we're launching come the end of the year, which I call strategic sales execution. And there's a couple steps to really looking at, okay, how are we going to crush our sales numbers this year? 12% increase.
But no increase in headcount, no increase in resources. You just got to basically do 12% more of the same stuff you had this year.
Yeah. So you got to do better, right? You got to do, the old more with less or more with the same. And to me, assuming I've got some sales managers, the key first step is getting everyone focused on what are the critical factors for success? I talked about that earlier. And if you can really get buy-in from your team and involve them in the process of defining what's going to make you successful this year, or going to help you achieve your 12% growth, that's the first step. So, we have processes to do that, but really it's a brainstorming and then, prioritizing and picking the three things that, the team feels is going to drive success.
Okay.
And then executing those extremely well. Okay. So maybe it's we're going to focus on a specific customer type to grow the business. So we have the managers, decide what what the key focuses are, what the critical success factors are. Then we have them build a plan and build their own metrics in terms of how we're going to measure this to know that we're on track.
And let them decide their own metrics on that.
Yeah, well, we can we facilitate that process, but one of the things is you want everyone to buy in, because we all know that a great plan without buy-in does not yield you great success. But an average plan with great buy-in will yield you better success. So we bring everyone in, at least the sales management team, sales leadership team. We get them aligned, focused. They build their plan around what they're going to do to be successful. Again, focused on doing a few things really well, and have them build their own metrics. We then actually, the sales leader then has a tracking mechanism and can, focus on what they've agreed to execute, and build a tracking mechanism to keep that on track, and to work with them on an ongoing basis to coach them, to mentor them, and to keep execution top of mind in terms of focus. So in terms of your question, to me, it's about aligning your sales organization, getting them focused, and then being able to execute with excellence.
All right.
That 12% becomes 15 if you tell senior management.
Excellent. All right. I can see what you would have been like to work with. All right. So now some rapid fire questions.
Well, I thought that was a rapid fire question.
No, gosh. This you can give me, well, you probably can't give me one-word answers, but you can give short answers, elaborate if you wish. So the first one is, in your opinion, is it easier to teach a technical non-salesperson how to sell, or teach a salesperson how to sell a product or service?
I would say it's hard to learn how to sell. That you can learn the product knowledge or the technical knowledge. Selling is there's a strong art to it, and you want the right personality.
Okay. If you could change one thing about your business self, what would it be?
Honestly, to be better at sales.
Yeah, all right, I like that.
Okay.
So what's the one non-business book every salesperson should read?
That's a good one. I might be stumped here. I'm looking at my books. I only read sales books. Oh, here's a good one. Enlightened Leadership. Is that a cop-out?
Yeah, it is. It sounds like a business book.
No, it's a business book. Okay. I'm lost outside.
Okay, we're gonna have to broaden your horizons.
That's the problem. I'm very focused in one or two specific areas.
I know. We're gonna give you an assignment. When we get off there, we'll give you an assignment.
Okay.
All right. Well, good. Well, Steven, thanks so much for joining me. Tell folks how they can find out more about you and to connect with you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Andy. It was great chatting with you. And as always, I'm happy to come back again and maybe have something new to talk about. But I can be reached at www.starresults.com. If you're looking for the Star Sales Manager report that Andy and I were talking about, you can get a free copy by typing in www.starresults.com/Sales Manager Report. And you can also find me on LinkedIn or on the web, and look forward to anyone who's interested joining one of my webinars. And we do some really good training on it to help you. And if you want more, we offer more as well.
Okay. Well, we'll have that information on the show notes page for this episode. Again, Steven, thanks for joining me. And remember, friends, thanks for joining us today, and make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And one easy way to do that is to take a minute and subscribe to this podcast, Accelerate. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Steven Rosen, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.